puzzles. And one of the impetuses for this talk is a puzzle book I came out with recently, which I'll talk a little bit about, but it's, we're going to talk about a lot more stuff than just that book. So first off, let's talk about what the job of someone who wants to construct puzzles is. The key one really is the first one. If you solve a puzzle and you don't feel smart when you solved it, then the puzzle constructor failed. I mean, what's the fun if you feel stupid after you get it? Oh, I can't believe how stupid I was. I couldn't figure that out. It's a lot more fun when you say, oh, I am really smart that I figured it out. And that's really what makes puzzles fun and exciting and why people do them. And there's even proof that puzzles stave off Alzheimer's, so they really do make us feel smart. The other things are that the constructor has to think of the solver as a partner. Just like when we're developing software, we have to think of our users as partners. If we think, we don't really care about our users, then we're going to have a lousy piece of software. And if we think we don't really care about the solvers, we're going to have a lousy puzzle. Oh, don't worry, this slide's boring. Other slides are more interesting.
Can't see the slides? Pressing presentation mode here.
Can you see the slides now? I said they can hear the slides. Can you see the slides now? Okay. I told you it wasn't a very interesting slide. We'll go back. You can see my name. Okay, there we go. Okay. So in terms of the challenges of constructing puzzles, there are a bunch, but these are really the main ones. Solvability, you have to make sure that the puzzle is actually solvable. You have to make sure your solution is unique, or at a minimum that you know how many solutions there are. If there are 5,212 solutions and you think there's only one, then that's going to be really disappointing. And of course, you want it to be fun. So those are the challenges, and that's the end of my talk. Questions? Okay, let's go into a little more detail here. First, let's talk about combinatorics. This is one of the aspects of dealing with puzzles. So here's a puzzle. This puzzle is called puzzle coasters. And the idea is that each of these are a coaster that sits on your coffee table. And if you put them in an order, not this one obviously, you can make a 4x4 double word square, spelling words in both directions. And there's only one way to do that. So how do I know there's only one way to do that? Well, fortunately, there's only 1.7 trillion ways that you can arrange those letters. So, just spend 200 days going through them and narrow it down, and there's only one. But, of course, we can prune our search tree, and that'll get us down to a few days. But, of course, people don't just randomly place letters. You're trying to make words. So there's only 582 words. So if we just go and we look at the words, we can do 582 words, 581 words left, 580, 579. That's a lot less. That'd only take us 13 days. So that's not really efficient either. And of course, think about the solver. If this puzzle really takes 13 days to solve, at 100,000 tries a second, it's not going to be fun. So how does the solver look at it? Well, the solver might notice there's an X. And there's only 18 words with X's. Well, that's a lot less than 580. And in fact, if we look at it, let's take a look at Zist, which of course everyone in the room knows what a Zist is, right? Okay, great. So why is Zist on this list anyway? Because Zist is not in the answer. Because I'm not going to use a word that, a whole room of smart people, nobody knows what it means. It's a type of pergola. So now you know, if you ever get it, pergola. Oh, another word you don't know. Well, does anyone know what a pergola is? Come on, define a pergola in terms of a word that no one else will know.
I know what a Zist is. I don't think it was a pergola, though. I said Zist was a bone scraper.
Oh, it might be that, too. That's the great thing about words. They actually have meaning sometimes. The Pioneer Square pergola is a pergola. I mean, it's a structure with without a roof, usually, that vines might grow on that might be in a garden. So anyway, but Zist is in this list because someone might know that word and think it's in the answer. And so if there's an altered solution with Zist in it, then that's a problem, and I have to make sure there isn't one. X-ray is not on this list, but it should be. But it doesn't matter because the solution doesn't have X-ray in it either for the same reason. So if we look at that, the number drops dramatically. So 18 words with X's, those have to cross one of the other words. There's only 17 other words. And in fact, if we look, we can instantly tell Zist is not on the top row because there's no other word with an X to go down. And so can Zist be in the second row? Well, it can only be in the second row if it crosses one of these words with an X in the second one. So the number of combinations is actually much smaller than this. But in the end, the check for this is under a minute. So we went from something that might have taken 200 days to calculate to something that's a minute. And that actually also tells us that a person might actually be able to solve it. So this, a technique like this is not just restricted to X's, although it happens to be convenient here. In fact, if you pick any letter of which there's only one, the same sort of a pruning technique can narrow down the search space dramatically. So the other thing about this particular puzzle is that we're stuck on this slide. How can we be stuck on this slide? It's a great slide, but how about choosing next in the menu? Let's see if that works. Okay. So one of the side effects of this particular type of puzzle is this is what's called a coffee table puzzle. And when you have a puzzle that's going to sit around, you want to make it fun to play with when you're not solving it, because otherwise it's not going to stay on the coffee table. So in this particular case, you can make lots of different words from it. And in fact, it's coasters. So if a coaster's in use, you can still make lots of words from 15 or 14 or 13 letters. Whoop. Okay, so here's another puzzle. This is also a physical puzzle. This is called just dominoes. And these are word dominoes. Some have two words, one above the other, and some have two words horizontally. And the idea here is to make phrases like light open. Okay, that's not a legitimate phrase, but milk room is a legitimate phrase. And I guess that's the only one that's, black ice is a legitimate phrase. Okay, so the actual puzzle, the full puzzle, looks like this. So you got a whole bunch of them, you're supposed to make a grid of these things. And there's lots of combinations, lots of alternative things. If we look, first glance, 20 dominoes, that's just a huge number. But even if we had the compute time, and even if we could prune it and do the same sort of thing we just did a second ago, we don't have a list of possible phrases that are legitimate. So that's actually the first thing we have to do. We have to involve a person. There's 1,560 pairs. So you generate that list, and then a person, meaning me, goes through and says, these might be considered phrases. And in fact, I marked ones that are not phrases, but that someone might think is legitimate. Because I want to make sure that you can't solve the whole puzzle, and it all fits together, and there's one thing in there that you thought was a phrase and wasn't, but you think you have an alternate solution. And then, given that, the code to go and check the pairs is not very hard. And in fact, if you start at the upper left corner and you go to the lower right corner, you'll fail. I mean, well, you won't fail, but it just takes way, way too long. And of course, people don't do that. They say, ooh, these two go together. Ooh, these two go together. Oh, I can make a group here. And so the software that goes and checks here does the same thing. So it took me far, far longer to tell which pairs were legitimate because it's really boring. And then the actual verification that there's only one solution is very, very quick. Because there are a few that there's only 3 words that go together, so you know that's a cluster. Here's another cluster, you know that's a cluster, and you can start constructing it.
What qualifies as legitimate?
You mean a legitimate pair?
Yeah.
Well, if we go back here, let's see. Blood boy? Well, blood cell, blood bank, light room, sour milk, tea cake, football's probably in here. And of course, some of these are not in the answer. I mean, if every single word only went with 3 other words, it wouldn't be as much fun. You have to have some variability where you're going, oh, I think this is a pair. Oh, it turns out that's not. But let me see if I can find one that's not a real one. Split day. Is that a phrase? Okay. The answer is, for the purpose of test solving, yes. Because someone might say, oh, I have a split day class. That's a legitimate phrase. You're not going to find it in most phrase books. It's certainly not in the dictionary. But that's a potential red herring. So you have to make sure that that doesn't lead to a solution. So even though you know that the puzzle is solvable, physically solvable, that's not enough. A puzzle that's this complicated has got to be test solved. You have to actually have people really solve it. And without that, just because it's provably correct doesn't mean it's actually going to be at all interesting to solve. So you really have to go and test solve on something like that. Okay, a different type of puzzle. This is a path puzzle. This is a very easy path puzzle. You rotate the wheels. You want to move the red thing from here to there, and there's these two black things in the way. Okay, and you glance at this, and I think probably everyone could figure out how to solve this pretty quickly. But a slightly more complex version with an extra constraint. And all of these sort of puzzles have, I'm trying to think of the taxi puzzle is a commercial example. There's a bunch of puzzles like this where you're moving things around and you have to get something from point A to point B, sliding block puzzles. So in this particular one, you want to get the red from here to there, and the extra constraint is that you can't put two of the same color in any spot at the same time. And of course, the thing's pretty full. So how do you do that? And you have to shuffle back and forth. So in order to do a puzzle like this, what you do is you build a tree. And the tree is, I'm at the start state. Here are all the possible moves I can make. From each of those, here are all the possible moves I can make. From each of those, here are all the possible moves I can make. And then, the branches are going to merge back up, because if you do move A and move B, and then you reverse them, we do have commutative properties sometimes, and you're going to end up with branches that go together. There may be more than one way to solve it. You want to find the shortest path to say, okay, it's 23 moves or something. So one disadvantage of this type of puzzle is you can't prune. There is no short circuiting. You have to go and do the tree, at least to the point of the fastest solve. However, the computer is much more efficient than we are, because we forget what we did. And we will end up in the same state after 17 moves. Oh, we're back in the same state. We don't remember that 17 states ago we were in the same exact position, and we got there by this whatever. But when we're building the tree, it's actually much more efficient. And so it is quite reasonable to do this. The way you construct a puzzle like this is you start at the end, and you go backwards. Because if you start at the beginning, you may not be able to go to the end. You don't know that this is actually solvable. And this puzzle is trivial enough that we know it's solvable. But in a typical sliding block puzzle, you may not be able to solve it from a given start state. So you have to start at the end state and go backwards, find an interesting start state to get to.
What makes start state interesting?
It's aesthetically pleasing. It looks hard. The red is in the one corner in the end, and you get it all the way up to the other corner at the beginning. You go, oh, that's cool. So there's no ironclad rule. I mean, if you're in a puzzle store and you pick up a puzzle, what makes it look interesting to you? Ooh, that looks cool. I'll actually show a couple things that look cool, and that's the one. The circle puzzle does not look cool. So one of the things I'm doing is I launched a website called Pizazz about 6 weeks ago, and it's a daily puzzle. It's one simple daily puzzle that's supposed to take you to 1 to 3 to 4 minutes a day. Then on Sunday there's a slightly bigger puzzle. So what?
What did you build it with?
What did I build it with? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I built it with Google App Engine, which I actually am a big fan of, and I'm busy doing a second startup right now, also on Google App Engine. So and it was much easier to launch it on Google App Engine than it would have been almost anywhere else. So there's the advertisement. I'll expect my payment later. So the thing on Pizazz is that there's one simple puzzle every day, and this is today's puzzle. And if you figure it out, then you can go to Pizazz.com and you can enter it and sign up, and I'll track how well you're doing. So in this particular puzzle, it says, give me a word, move one letter to another position to make a second word. Does anyone in the room know the answer? And the answer is? That's correct. Okay. And that's great, because that took you a minute, and now you can go and do the rest of your day. And that's the idea behind Pizazz. So part of fun is not, oh, I have to spend half an hour on it in this particular case. Here's another puzzle, which is a 7-letter word meaning cut back. In this case, we change one specific letter to another letter to make a new word, and that word is something made out of fabric. Anyone know this one? No fair, Bruce. But we can move on. Bonus points if you get it later. Okay. And then this one is what's called a letter bank puzzle. Take these 4 letters, ENSL, duplicate them any number of times, and make a new 9-letter word and a 13-letter word that's related to it. Very good. And what's the 15-letter word? Right. Which is pretty cool that you can do that out of only 4 letters. So how do you find these things? So these things, what's underneath those puzzles, these are called bases. So here's some examples of some other bases. And I'll just run through them real quickly. Remove 2 letters, change the last letter, remove a letter and rearrange successively. This is another letter bank puzzle here. Remove a letter in the middle. Anagram. This is what's called a consonancy. All the consonants are the same. All the vowels are different. Cole Porter didn't even know he was doing consonancies. And this is a I can't remember what that one's called. And this is a reversal. And I did not discover this reversal, but I love it. So how do you find these things? So it's not really hard. You just write SQL queries. Sorta. Because SQL doesn't actually do these sort of things. But these are pretty easy. You know, just sorted of entry 1 and matches sorted of entry 2, and we're done. And just pull the consonants out. The other ones, let's take this one. We want something where only the last letter changes. That's, SQL 2.0, I think is what this might be called. And then this one's even more complicated. And there's actually would be a line missing that says, for k equals some range of values of k. So needless to say, SQL doesn't do this. So I built a custom database that does this sort of stuff. The short version of what is in the database is lots and lots of indexes. And the indexes take hours and hours to build. But once the indexes are built, queries that were previously taken 5 minutes or 20 minutes or hours take seconds. And it makes a huge difference in trying to find things. So in particular, I can say I want a 9-letter word that becomes a 7-letter word and has all the letters in common except 2, and et cetera. And I can do those sort of things. I don't type queries like this. It's all checkboxes and things like that. But the end result is that I'm able to do that very quickly. And if you look at other constructors, there are tons and tons of constructors who build very, very special purpose stuff to do just this sort of stuff. Constraints on puzzles. So this is the sample puzzle that was on the poster. Did everybody solve it? Okay, good. So this is Bill and Steve. Yeah. Okay. So this sort of puzzle is all about the constraints. And a normal a Sudoku puzzle has constraints. 1 to 9. It's got the rows, the columns, etc. So here, the extra constraints are huge. These puzzles are actually much, much harder to construct than a normal Sudoku, because these spaces cannot be used, and this space cannot be used because there's a circle over here. So in this particular case, it's on the diagonal, which is nice because there's only one dead space. But in other puzzles in the book, there are 10 spaces I can't put givens in. And I would frequently have to rearrange the puzzle in order to make it constructible. The other thing that's really hard is getting the difficulty level right. And the difficulty level in the book goes from easy to pretty hard at the end of the book. And constructing the harder puzzles is actually, in this particular case, the opposite in a lot of other puzzles is actually harder. So in order to create these puzzles, the first thing you have to do is write a solver, because you have to know if your puzzles are correct. So the solver, and I wrote a very, very, very slow solver. I mean, it is massively inefficient. It's written in C#, which by itself is not efficient, but every single cell is an object. I have clusters of objects. It's very, very, it takes a lot of memory, et cetera. And I did that because I wanted to make it as flexible as possible. And I can generate n-dimensional Sudokus. I can generate round ones because most of the software has no idea what the thing actually looks like. It just knows about the set of constraints for this particular puzzle. So this is so slow that to solve a puzzle like this takes, a tenth of a second. I mean, that gives you an idea how slow it is. Dancing links, which is the algorithm in Knut's book, is probably 1,000 times faster. But it doesn't give you any information. I don't know anything about what the result of solving. I just have the answer now. and I actually need to know how it was solved in order to be able to go further. So the way in which I'm constructing is I come up with an answer. Okay? The answer is an acceptable answer, and the answer actually uses the solver with an extra thing in it that says, oh, if it can be one of two numbers, just pick one randomly. And then you manage to fill in a solution. So now here's a solution. And then you have to calculate which are the givens. And notice that the givens are symmetric. So it takes givens away until it's not solvable. And then says, oh, I guess I need a little more than that. And it sticks something back in. And the difficulty level is, now I have a puzzle, and that has a difficulty level, let's say 80. And in terms of my own scale, difficulties in the book range from 70 to about 400. So I need a bunch that are 300, 400 difficulty level. And so I say, okay, I got that. Throw that away, do it again. Let's see how difficult that one is. And because of my excess constraints, I can't go and know the difficulty level until I go and try and solve it. And I also will say, well, what if I take two of these away? Is this still solvable? Because obviously the difficulty level will go up if I remove a couple givens. So that's basically the process here.
What do you mean by determining the difficulty level? Does it mean using more complex rules and constraints to
Yes.
get it, or have it be that there are more, you get to a point where it's not solvable until you make a guess, and it's going to take more steps before you can know
Right.
for sure that your guess was right or wrong?
Right. Well, there's two things. So first of all, there's no guesses in Sudoku. You can guess, but that's not the right way to solve it. The right way to solve it is to know every number you put in is correct. So, so in the case of the difficulty levels, there's two factors. One is the techniques you use. And the solver uses very, very simple techniques to very, very complex techniques. And if it has to use a complex technique, then that bumps it up. The other thing is the number of times the techniques are used and the way in which they're used. So if I look at this thing, and using the simplest technique, I can fill in three numbers or three letters, and that's all I can fill in. That's great. That's sort of one round. After I fill in those three letters, if the same technique can let me fill in a few more letters, then that's great, but that makes the puzzle harder than if the same technique would have instantly let me fill in 6 letters. In other words, I have to make 2 passes. So the 2 passes makes the puzzle harder. It doesn't make it as harder as if I'd used a harder technique, but it still ups the difficulty level. So that's basically, the simplest Sudoku, you look at it and you just fill in all the letters. I'm done. Okay? So if I have to make 5 passes, then clearly that's harder than if I only had to make 1 pass. So that's sort of a short version of how the difficulty is gauged. It's not terribly scientific, and I don't publish the difficulty levels. And the fact is, puzzle 52 might be easier than puzzle 51 for you, because everyone varies in terms of what you see. Okay, some other things here. I'm going to guess some of you might be familiar with this place. I know you never go eat lunch there, but does anyone notice what's wrong with this picture? Other than Bruce. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds. People in other locations can guess too. No. It was missing something. The is missing. I constructed a puzzle which was actually used as a puzzle in a Google intern hunt about a year ago. Maybe 2 years ago. It's been a while. But the idea was they have to go over to Kirkland Park Place and wander around and find the originals of a whole bunch of pictures and find what was wrong with them. And all the pictures had to be the case. You couldn't just look at the picture and know what's wrong. So if it says something, Smith and blank flowers, if you haven't been to the florist, you're not going to know what the blank is. You actually have to go there. But in this particular case, anyone who'd been in the shopping center knew it. But even if you didn't know it, if I take out the C in pancake, I think the C is missing. It's not very hard. Or the original pan, people are going to guess, oh, it's pancake. This guy is not flipping a pan, he's flipping a pancake. So what do you do? And so I came up with the idea of removing the word the. And the result was, of course, that people look at it and they don't know what's wrong until they go and they compare. This is another environmental puzzle. This is a cube at the University of Michigan. And there's another one in New York City. The one in New York City was famously made into a Rubik's Cube. Google that. I'm sorry. Use the Google registered trademark search engine to search for it. Okay. So this spins. And when I was doing this hunt that was going to be at the University of Michigan, I knew I had to go and use this. And the question is how? Actually, I'll say one other thing. It's fun to spin. And that was, that was part of the important thing. So this is the puzzle that goes with it. And the actual thing actually said, yes, you can spin it. And so people actually did spin it, and it was actually a little easier to solve if you spun it. So what this is you have to take these shapes, line them up with the actual thing, figure out what it is, and then depending on the orientation, they make different letters. This could be an M or an E or W or a B, depending on which way it's oriented. A couple of funny anecdotes about the same hunt. This was in concrete, about 2 feet from a fire hydrant. And so I used this in the hunt, and I was very surprised to go there and find that it was gone. Because you think, not only is it in cement, but there's a fire hydrant. But it was an old fire hydrant, and they had moved it across the street. So even when you think, this building's going to be here forever, it's not necessarily the case. And here's a little fun thing I did, is that this is John F. Kennedy plaque commemorating his founding the Peace Corps on the steps of the Michigan Union. And so you actually had to read the plaque. You couldn't just go there and notice something. You actually had to read the text in order to solve the puzzle. And so that was a fun thing I could do with an environmental puzzle. Special audiences. This puzzle, there's one mistake here. One of these is supposed to be up here. I'm not sure which. But in any event, this is just a little connect the dots puzzle. And if it looks like you're missing something, you're not. This was for 6-year-olds. So 5 to 6-year-olds. And when you actually connect the dots, you get that. So, when you're doing a puzzle for a group like that, the constraints, the requirements, they're totally different. You have to go and build something which is going to work for them, which is completely solvable. And when they're done, they look at that and they go, that's a piano. They don't go, what is that? Here's another puzzle for the same hunt that one was for. And you're supposed to pair these up, and there's a missing one in each one of them. And you guys watch Cartoon Network, well, tic-tac-toe is not very hard. One of the funny things about this is that one of the kids had a huge problem with this. Just couldn't solve it. And the reason was they were from Israel, and they'd been in the United States about 3 months. So they didn't know any of these. These are all cartoon shows, and none of the other kids had a problem. But even with kids, you have to think about cultural issues and stuff. This was for 6th graders. And you connect the dots. So one of the things here is that even though 6th graders are a little more sophisticated, but I have to make it so you can't go and just guess at what the letters are. Oh, I got a bunch of letters here. Oh, I can see what you're going to spell out of here, and I'm going to skip solving the puzzle. So talk about aesthetics. Everyone know who this is? Very close. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Elvis Costello. So in this particular puzzle, this was for the National Puzzlers League. This actually won 2nd place in the puzzle writing competition. The constraints in this, I imposed these constraints completely on myself, so I only had myself to blame. But the rhythm of the song had to work. All the clues for what you're trying to solve it had to work. It had to look like Elvis. I had to make the guitar be darker so that you could see it was a guitar. Toward the end, I was going, why did I do this to myself? But the end result was that even though I'd added all these extra constraints, it was a successful puzzle, and I was happy that I did it. So, just in case you think puzzle writing is too hard, you can always add whatever extra constraints you want. Games. So this, I actually have something to hand out here. I'll pass this around. Yes, this is a game. Bruce brought this, and here is the real game. And I won't pass this around because they're smaller pieces and stuff. But so pull the pieces out. And the reason I brought that is that this is the second prototype, and it doesn't look exactly like the final one. But this was the first prototype. And you know, I'd had this game in my head. I designed it, and I didn't have a playable version. And then one day I said to myself, and I just sort of kicked myself, and I said, Sharpie. And I went, and I took out my Sharpie, and you know, 20 minutes later, I had a playable game. Now, it's not nearly as elegant as the real tiles. And then at some point after that, I said, hey, you know what? Transparent labels. So I got a bunch of transparent labels, and it takes hours and hours and hours to cut them out and put them on the thing, et cetera. My laser printer doesn't like transparent labels very much. But nonetheless, I ended up with a much more playable version, which is this one. And then this summer, I found a laser cutting place that would do the tiles the way I wanted. And so now I have a playable game. So in this particular case, you know, the hardest thing was manufacturing. It wasn't coming up with a game. I did spend a fair amount of time on balancing the number of letters and stuff. And notice there's no scores on here. Those were on a separate piece of paper in this version of the prototype. So one of the most important things in puzzles is defeating Google. Well, and other things, anagram engines, Sudoku solvers. And actually today it's a real problem in sort of the puzzle world and in puzzle events. There was a puzzle event, was it last weekend or 2 weekends ago, where they explicitly said you cannot use your phone as a browser. No technology. And, you know, the problem is that, you know, you give some sort of puzzle and you can solve it in 1 second with Google, or you can solve it with 1 second with an anagram engine, and that makes it no fun for other people in a competition. So here's a great example of Google bait. This is a crossword. This is a custom crossword that I did for someone, and I didn't do it in 1954. That was the wedding anniversary of the people I did it for. So I did this for June 26, 2004. And so this was a 50th anniversary puzzle, and 50 goes right here. But if you're looking at this, a 1992 presidential contender. Well, gee, there were only 2. 1996 Tony-winning musical. I can Google that. Joey LaMotta in Raging Bull. Sitka Dweller. Blank There, 1979 movie. I mean, I can find all these very, very quickly in Google. You know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it is the case that in a daily crossword you can search for things. But it's nicer when you have a puzzle that you can't. So here's one. This is not Google bait. Look at these clues. Compass direction. I know them all. There are only 8 of them, you know. So which ones am I using? And actually, I know there's no 2-letter words in here. So I know this is either north, south, east, or west. Okay? So I can't go and Google this. Maybe I can Google fictional doctor. But how many are there? Hundreds. It doesn't actually help me to go and get the Wikipedia list of fictional doctors. So a puzzle like this, Google's not going to help you. Another sort of thing is cryptic crosswords. So I'm not going to go over these. These are an exercise for the future viewer. So if we look here, people here solve cryptic crosswords? Anybody? So a cryptic crossword is half of the clue is a clue, and half of it is the definition. So in this case, exercise equipment was Bill's true beginning with computer base. So what's a computer base? Or another one might be, oh, that's good. In this case, 8, octal. Okay, so Bill's true beginning, well, Bill is, of course, well, it's got to be Bill Gates, right? And he's really William. The true beginning of his name is W. W plus 8 is weight. Exercise equipment is weight. So that's how a cryptic clue works. Google's not going to help you with this. There actually are specific programs written to help solve these, but they're not very good because there's sort of too much subtlety and too much intelligence. So these are great. So feel free to look at these later. We won't go through them at the moment. Here's another one. These are haiku. It takes a brain to solve this. You can't go and say, well, hurricane winds. Let's go take a look at that and see what that tells us. It doesn't work like that. This is a cryptogram that was specifically designed to foil cryptogram solvers. First of all, they're all short. So it's like, what's this person saying? So you have to sort of think, what sort of things might these people be saying? Could that sort of word be anywhere in here, etc.? But the real cool thing is that the alien, well, the alien is not saying, take me to your leader. The alien is saying, block, blik, blik, block. And so one of these, when you decrypt it, is garbage. And so that makes it completely impossible to look, say, oh, these are all normal words. I'll go look them up. Or guess that one of them is take me to your leader. No, it's actual garbage. But it's very solvable because the letter distributions are roughly right, etc. Here's another cryptogram that was designed to foil cryptogram solvers. Because on these things, love is spelled L-U-V. And 2 is spelled the number 2. So, these letter distributions also roughly match English. But these words, with the exception of me, and a couple words like that, they're not sort of normal English words. So, for, I'm not sure what this is, but it's got 2 letters together. It's not love. I don't know. What? Ever. Forever. Actually, I think you're right. Yes. Oh, so now we know that the D is the E, and we can go on and solve. These sort of things, there are lots of cryptogram engines. The National Puzzlers League on the website has a cryptogram solver, and every month someone goes to the cryptogram solver and removes, this is just amazing, makes it so it cannot solve this month's cryptograms that are in the monthly publication of the league. So that you can use the cryptogram solver for any other cryptograms except these 6, which is just amazing. Here's another puzzle. It's very easy to look at these and say, oh, golf is spelled wrong. And then the subsequent step is, you have to think, what does that mean? And again, it's, no computer is going to help you with that. This is a fun one. Does anyone know what you get when you cut these out and fold them up? You get the Soma cube. And this one is particularly fun because, you get this piece of paper and you cut it out and you go, oh, they're Soma cubes. And now I can make a cube, and there's lots of ways to make the cube. And so which way do you make the cube that will spell something? And so this is RD from mid, and the word mid, DLE is right here, middle column. And so then you take the sides and you transpose them into the grid you were given away at the beginning, and then you read down and you get a word. So this did not taste as good as it was supposed to, but this was a puzzle. And you had to figure out what the ingredients were on it. So you actually had to taste it and figure out what those ingredients were. This is one of my favorite non-computerish puzzles. We gave you this plus a bunch of letters. And you had to make sign language with the letters. And when you made sign language, the ink on your hands would spell out regular letters. So you do, I don't know, a V or something, and then you can see on one side or the other a normal letter. The constraints in terms of building this, we had to make sure that there were no other letters. There's only the one letter, no matter how you held your hand, only the one letter in the one color. And so as we were constructing this thing, we kept saying, oh no, okay, we got to color this finger differently now, and we have to do this, and et cetera. It was quite hard to construct. The first team, this was in a team event, the first team that solved this solved in about 5 minutes. And we were just amazed that they solved it so quickly. Because, of course, the first thing you do is, I don't want to write on my hand. What they did is they went to the medical supply kit and got a glove, a latex glove, and they just sharpied it up, and they solved it, and boom, 5 minutes later. The second team was like 2 hours. So, okay, so let's talk about a few resources here. Up on Pizazz.com, I actually have a resource page of some selected resources that I have. A couple things I'll call out from there, though, is Cruciverb is a website for people constructing crosswords. There's also a mailing list, and that's very, very valuable. There are links to a whole bunch of crossword constructing tools, not so much of other types of constructing tools up there. And there's a link to the National Puzzlers League, which is the world's oldest puzzling organization. And most of the professional constructors in the country are members of the league, and probably all of the, I call myself semi-professional. I make money, but it's not my living. most of them are also in the league, and it's great for solvers and constructors. A little bit of shameless promotion. Pizazz.com is the daily puzzle website with, of course, Google Ads and built on Google App Engine. Whodoku is just a one-page website which promotes the book. I have a couple blogs that might be of interest to people here. This user is on user interfaces, usability, interacting with users. This dev is about software development. And then I'm trying to start a company called Groupthink, and I'm actually writing about it on this dev. And if you go to Groupthink, there's nothing there but a link to this dev. But within a week, it will actually be a live real site. So that's the non-puzzle content. Groupthink's first product is called Groupthink Projects. It's a web service that allows small businesses, people working in small groups, to coordinate their activities more efficiently and effectively. So real concentration is on tasks. It's not a scheduler. It's about we have a bunch of stuff we have to do, and we need to coordinate that. And no puzzles. So questions? Yes?
You seem awfully familiar. Do we know you from somewhere?
I've been told that I do look like somebody. But, I think it's a rumor.
You'll have to break your foot and we'll know for sure.
That's great. Well, earlier in my life, I was on crutches because I had bad knees. So he didn't get his knees broken. So I think I'm going to reject that. Other questions? Oh, come on. Someone's got to have a question. Talk wasn't that good.
Has the ready availability of software in the internet decreased the value of puzzles based on knowledge?
That's a good question. And I'll extend that question just a little bit. Has it reduced the value of constructors? If you go to the bookstore, you can buy a book of Dell Crosswords, which are constructed by computer, and they are awful. They're just bad. Why they sell, none of us know. But their market share has not increased. So they sell, they're the bottom rung, they're cheap, they're throwaway. Maybe people buy them for airplanes. I mean, I really don't know, but they're they have a market segment. The other thing is, if you go back 20 years, crosswords in particular were very factual based. There were no fun clues. It was city in Nevada. Whereas today you might have a clue, they gamble there. That's a little more interesting. And you might have a clue. I'll skip examples. But the point is, there are two genres, and the Dell crosswords that are made by computer are all factual. And so they're a lot less fun, but there are people, particularly older solvers, who grew up with the old style, and sometimes they still want that. They don't want the new fun stuff because they're so used to the old style. So to them, that's more fun. But there are lots of tools to create things by computer, and in general, they fall into two camps. They're worthless, or they really just ate a person, and you still need the human involvement. One of the things that I think is a bad thing is if you go to Cruciverb and you join and you're what's called a gold member, which means you donate money, you get to download a database of all the words that have been used in the New York Times, LA Times, and a couple other crossword puzzles. And I actually have all that data, and I have far more. My database of entries, my small database, is 2 million entries. And the thing is that people go and they use that, and then they construct puzzles with that. Well, the problem is there are millions of words that have never appeared in the New York Times, never appeared in the LA Times, because the total number of words is much, much smaller than that. But they're legitimate words. Until someone put Google in the first time, it wasn't in the list. So you're never going to get a new word. A puzzle just the other day had .com boom in it. I guarantee that's the first time that appeared. A person has to be thinking, what could I put in here? What might fit? Or just be saying, oh, here's a phrase I want to stick in my dictionary. And so, no matter how many tools there are, they're not going to supplant the people.
So on the flip side, how
Well,
in a positive aspect?
oh, it definitely helps. I'll give you a great example. I was constructing a puzzle in an event called Iron Puzzler. So we had 12 hours to construct a puzzle from start to finish. And there were certain theme ingredients we had to fit in it. And we were stupid. And we said, we're going to construct a big 21 by 21 crossword. And then we're going to put a hole in the middle. And we're going to get all the theme ingredients in. And of course, because crosswords are symmetric, we're going to insist it's symmetric, even with our 13-letter words and stuff. And the other guy who was doing, there were two of us who did most of the construction. And the other guy doesn't use computers, does it by hand. And, that works, but it can be faster. Sometimes it can be slower sometimes. Because you just instantly say, oh, here's a word that'll fit, here's a word that'll fit. But when we got toward the end, when we got to the problem areas, he desperately needed me to look in my databases and say, oh, here's some words that can fit. Because we had some tricky corners. And in addition, that happened to be for a Microsoft event. And so we had SMTP as one of the entries. We had a few entries that you couldn't use elsewhere. Mike, who didn't work at Microsoft, is not a technology guy. He didn't know SMTP. It's actually in my database. Why, I don't know, but it is. But the computer really helps in that case. The other thing in terms of just general constructing is it's much, much, much faster at some things. An example is I've got a crossword. I've laid out some stuff. I like my grid. I like my theme entries. Is it constructible? I can go and I can run the automated software. It can fill the whole grid. And I can do that 10 times, get 10 different fills. And I can go, OK, that's good. I know it's constructible. The other thing that I'll do then is I might notice that in a couple of the long slots, it was using only 2 or 3 words. And it was using them repeatedly. And so I will go, well, I like this word best of those 3 words. I'm going to stick that one in and go from there. And then the result is that if I hadn't known that extra piece of information from running this test, I might have tried to put other words in that are never going to fly. I'm never going to be able to construct the whole puzzle. Or I might get stuck with one of those words I didn't like as much. But in this case, I know that there's only a couple words that are going to fit here, and I want the one that's more snappy. So it does help a lot. You just have to be judicious. One of the things that you'll see on the Cruciverb mailing list is that new constructors are constantly saying things like, is QZYW a word? Is that OK? And basically what I've said is, if you're asking the question, the answer is no. It's not acceptable. Sometimes people will say, is Google acceptable as an entry in a puzzle? Can I use Google? Can I use Yahoo? Can I use some term like that? Can I use the word email? And obviously all those are so accepted right now that anyone would use it. But what about Linux? Is Linux acceptable as an entry? I would personally say on a Saturday, go for Linux. But early in the week, on a Monday puzzle, New York Times gets easier Monday, harder on Saturday. But it's human evaluation. Okay.
Question from Madam View.
Yes.
What's your favorite puzzle, or if you can't think of your favorite, what's like some of your favorite puzzles?
One that I've made or one that someone else made? I can name one of each. How's that? I'll name one that I didn't construct. It's a famous puzzle by Sam Lloyd. It's the vanishing person puzzle. Look up Sam Lloyd with 1 L, vanishing. There have been lots of versions. There was a Hillary Clinton, vanishing Hillary Clinton puzzle that they were made out of this. It's 2 rings, and there's like 11 people, and you rotate the rings, and there's 10. Like, where'd the person go? It's very, very nicely done. It's a famous puzzle. I would say that's probably definitely at the top of puzzles that I didn't construct. In terms of puzzles I've constructed, that's tough. They're like my children. I love them all. I would say some of the custom crosswords I've done might be at the top because they were constructed for a specific person or a specific event, and it's very rewarding to have someone who's the recipient of the puzzle. When I do one for the paper, I don't see most of the solvers. They're on the buses and trains of America, that sort of thing. Okay, go ahead.
Do you see with
Well, there is a theory that crossword puzzles are helping keep newspapers in business. That there's a huge class of solvers, and I'm one of them actually. I much prefer solving on paper to solving on the computer. It just doesn't feel the same for me. And I solve in pen.
It sucks on a computer screen.
Yeah, it's really, it's a real problem on the computer screen. And sometimes I solve in slightly darker pen than the letter that was there before. So, just because I solve in pen doesn't mean I never make a mistake. But, I think that the availability of lots and lots of crappy puzzles on the internet does have a deleterious effect. It does make people think, oh, puzzles aren't any good anymore because there's all these lousy puzzles. And part of the idea behind Pizazz was, it's not much of a puzzle every day, but it's good. I wanted the quality to be there, and maybe I'll build it up into something more later. But in the short run, I'm thinking I want it to be the case that every day is enjoyable for you. You solve it, you feel good. And there are unfortunately a lot of sites out there that are creating puzzles where they haven't even thought about that. They're just like, a crossword is this many words. We're done. As opposed to, is it actually fun? And some of those sites may, in fact, be completely automated generation. So that does definitely hurt quality. Yeah.
So you gave an example of like your daily puzzle with that, and it was like, with these letters, transform this word. Are you doing that yourself every morning? Like you wake up and you come up with it? Or
Well, the puzzle rolls over at midnight Pacific time, and sometimes I'm actually asleep at that time. Not very often, but occasionally. No, the puzzles are all queued up in advance.
Okay, and so do you usually solve, like, let's say, have you solved, like, Who-doku or stuff like that? Like, when you construct a puzzle and it's solvable, do you, like, double check it?
Well,
Just to see how fun it is?
so there's two aspects. There's double checking it, and there's solving it. And you can't solve your own puzzle. Maybe 10 years later, you can forget it. Actually, I'll digress for 1 second. A funny story. I was at my mother's house, and in the dictionary, I came across this crossword puzzle. And it was about my stepfather, so it was clearly a custom crossword. And it was unbelievably awful. I just, looking at the puzzle, the theme entries, the clues, it was just one of the worst crosswords I've ever seen. And it was mine. I had done it. So, at the time, I probably thought it was good, but I got a lot better over time. But it's, first attempts are always not so good. But you learn from it. So anyway, so back to verifying. So some puzzles can be verified mathematically, and in particular large complex puzzles or puzzles where you're planning to make 1 million of them or something. Verifying them that way is a good thing. But proving that it's solvable, proving that it's correct is not the same thing as proving that a person can solve it in a reasonable amount of time. And there is no substitute for finding someone to actually test solve it. I mean, I can assemble it, but that's not the same as if I hand it to you and you assemble it and it took you 10 minutes. So I know, okay, great, that's a 10-minute puzzle. Yes?
So I'm Roy's brother Bruce, for the benefit of people who who aren't here. So I just want to comment something about verification. So I edit the small subset of the puzzles in the National Puzzlers League's monthly publication. I edit it, on the order of about 5 to 10 puzzles a month. And when I took over that job, one of the first things I did was write a program that takes what people email me, and I stick it into the program, and it verifies the solution and prints it out nice and neatly so that what I mail to the Uber editor doesn't have any errors in it. That, frequently, most of what I get are quotes, and I verify all the quotes with Google Books or Amazon, look inside the book, try and find the actual original sources. It's amazing how many quotes are actually misquotes. But even if they get the quote right, sometimes what they'll do is when they're constructing the puzzle, they'll transpose 2 letters. And, they know what the answer is, and they don't notice it. So I have to fix those, and I want to make sure I don't make any mistakes in the final version that goes to press. And so I always send the output of my program, even, if what they sent me was correct. I didn't have to make any corrections, I still always send the output of my program. And then, avoid those problems.
I've certainly seen times when a minor last-minute tweak wrecked a puzzle. In one case, it took a puzzle from being solvable to being unsolvable. I mean, it was just not solvable, and it was really unfair to the people trying to solve it. And we didn't test solve it after the last change, which was too bad. You know, yeah, wasn't my puzzle. But in that particular case, I was the editor of the event, so it wasn't my puzzle, but I was still responsible, and I felt bad that we had let that puzzle out, and we didn't know. So, yeah, test solve.
Is Pizazz a way to get some puzzles sort of solved by community feedback before they go into print?
No, the puzzles in Pizazz are sort of small, so you know I don't envision at this point a book of Pizazz puzzles. I won't rule that out, but at the moment I'm not thinking about that. At the moment it's just a free puzzle site and it's kind of fun. And interestingly enough, the ads are about puzzles, crossword books, other stuff. The ads are targeted right. I don't get many lawyer ads, which is too bad because I know those pay more. But people do click on the ads, and you know it's not going to make me rich, but it's kind of funny that the ads are targeted well. I also have Amazon books there, and Amazon is not converting nearly as well as the Google ads, which is surprising because I handpicked all the books, so I know all the books are good. They're not just random books, but yeah, yeah, but. I think over time it will grow. It won't just be a puzzle of the day. Whim is I'm actually selling copies of the game, and I'll probably sell it on the site. So there'll be some other things there, but I don't know. Well, I'll see. Feedback welcome.
Microsoft came up a couple of times. Is that your day job?
Not anymore. I left them 5 years ago. So my day job is Groupthink. Job means I work really, really hard and I have no money. So, so I'm hoping it turns into something. That's the plan. Get funding, et cetera. But at the moment, it's a startup with no money. So, yeah.
With the Whodoku, obviously one difference from Sudoku is that there's a chance the person solving it will guess the final answer and get a bunch of extra clues.
Yes.
So how did you think about that when you were designing?
Well, that was deliberate. So part of the idea behind Whodoku is that it's there is an answer. I solve a Sudoku, and it's like, I got a bunch of numbers. Here, it's like, oh, I just learned that, Isaac Newton discovered gravity. That's so cool. I didn't know that before. And the idea was to give you a sense of satisfaction, whether it was a fact you knew or a fact you didn't know, that it feels good. And if you guess the fact and you're able to go and put that back in the grid, you feel good about it. You feel like I'm better than they thought I was. I got it faster. And so it's a real satisfying feeling. So that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
So it's another class game answer.
Okay. Oh. Okay, well, thanks.